Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings. Once again, we are your hosts, Lehman, Mark, and JM. Today we will be diving into the Nile Empire, everybody's favorite
Dum dum
reality.
dum.
Basically, this is the reality that if you ask the majority of players what their favorite reality is and game masters, they will say the Nile Empire. Um, Before we do jump in, we had no emails, so please send us your emails at torgdcd@gmail.com, and we will read those and answer questions or read your comments and things like that. So we'll be talking about inspirations at the beginning. So, JM, give me some of your inspirations for the Nile Empire.
So the Nile Empire is this 1930s pulp superhero inspired cosm. So weird science, low level, street level superheroes, Egyptian themed magic. So the ones that stand out to me on one side is like the Indiana Jones movies, right? Kind of that era and feel. And then on the other, movies like The Mummy, um, King Solomon's Mines, Romancing of the Stone. These may be too old. I may be dating myself. And
Nah, you're all
then
good, man.
the Phantom, the Phantom and the Shadow, right? Low level. Um, so if we were talking about comic books, these are like your street level heroes, not more like original X-Men than the Justice League, right? Everybody has maybe a one-trick pony. But you have Zeppelins, you have faceless goons that stand in for the Nazis in uh, the Indiana Jones movies, right? The shock troopers and Dr. Mobius. You have and it's also dramatic, like soap operas. Soap operas really uh, drove most of my Nile Empire things. Oh, you didn't kill Dr. Mobius. You killed the man he put in place, which was his bodyguard who had been seducing his wife. And then, and that child is not his. It's actually this bodyguard's clone. And they'll be back, when they wake up from the coma in season 2. So it's high drama, it's high melodrama, and I feel like you really have to lean into the melodrama. So those are kind of my inspirations for Nile Empire.
And we'll switch over to Mark.
You got all of mine except for one, and it's my absolute favorite, and it's the Rocketeer. I
Oh, I
love
forgot
the
about
Rocketeer.
this.
I mean, that is to me, that is Nile Empire.
Mhm.
If you watched only one movie to get the Nile Empire, the Rocketeer would be it for me because you got street level mob goons, you
Yeah,
got the mafia, you got the bad guys just before World War II and they start marching across Europe. You
yeah.
got this thing that we found in a field somewhere that
Mhm.
that got lost and whatever, and now I'm learning how to use it, and then now I use it and I'm the good guy, and it's you know camp Batman Biff Pow Bop kind of running around. And Betty Page is that's the ladies everywhere, and they've got
Yeah.
just speakeasies behind the door. And TV tropes. There's I think it's tvtropes.com is a website. Uh, and if you're we've talked about leaning into it before, but leaning into it is a subtle Nile Empire. If you're not over the top in the Nile Empire, you're just not doing it the way the Nile Empire. I mean, JM hit it spot on with the comic book slash soap opera kind
Mhm.
of, second cousin who nobody's heard of in 30 years and was lost in the Amazon jungle and has been living with a tribe of Aborigines, and suddenly here he is and he's got all these skills and nobody knows who Charles is, but he's, and they've never seen him in the room at the same time with the masked hero.
Yep.
And he happened they do this back and forth, and suddenly there he is, and everybody, um the Phantom's a good one. The Shadow's a good one. Any of your 1940s golden age comic book heroes are the vintage comic book stuff is good. Just and then mash that with Indiana Jones,
Yeah.
and then and over that put a veneer of Egypt, and there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much that. It's that pulp comic feel of the low powered superheroes. We're not talking, like JM said, it's not the Justice League or Modern Avengers. It is the street level ones that have a little more grit.
Everyday neighborhoods, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
They have vulnerabilities and things like that, which is an aspect we'll get into when we start talking about perks for the Nile Empire. Is you can lean into those bad things that can happen.
Is that next? Is that part two?
Either late part one or early part two,
Okay.
depending on how much we ramble.
Comic book wise, I think also like the Justice Society of America.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
like Hour Man, I have 1 hour of super strength, and Dr. Fate, I have this weird helmet that does weird magical stuff. Like, or Wildcat,
Yeah.
I'm a boxer. What's your
Mm-hmm.
superpower? I punch people
Really
really hard.
hard.
All right, like welcome to the Justice Society. Welcome to the
That's
Nile
right.
Empire.
Right.
Oh
And
my gosh.
it does also have that Egyptian
Mm-hmm.
mythology overlay. So you have because of the reality, there is an Egyptian. It's not just the archaeologists finding the
Mm-hmm.
ancient Egyptian. It's a modern talking 1930s Egypt
And the
as
Nile that never was.
and
Are we
the
gonna and the
yeah
Egypt that never was? Are we gonna get into that tonight, or was that part
probably
two?
next. That'll be part two.
Okay.
But it's a living, breathing Nile Egyptian empire. So it's not just there's these runes. It's the Pharaoh Mobius is the High Lord of the Nile Empire, and instead of like a star for the United States on the side of tanks, there's some Egyptian hieroglyph, the
The
Eye
Eye
of
of Ra.
Horus or Ra, something like that. There's different. It's Egyptian. They speak Egyptian. They write in hieroglyphics and things like that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just a really cool mashup. And so let's talk about one step down. Let's talk about the axiom levels. So the tech axiom is 20, and in relative speaking terms, modern Earth, what we live in now, is a 23. So it's not as far back as some of the other ones. It's definitely not future. It's Tech 20. It is the say the 30s. Very, very, very cutting edge would be the 40s. Anything to add, or I can just go through all of it. Social is 20. Also, it's a little bit behind us again at 23 in the modern world. Magic is high though because of the Egyptian spirituality. Plus, powering pulp stuff, a third, or there's three what I call sources for pulp powers, and one of them is magic source. You get that magic amulet that you put around your head, you wear it, and all of a sudden that is what imbues you with your magical power. And then since we're dealing with a Egyptian religion, then the spirit is pretty high at 18. So let's transfer over to Mark for any comments or anything else about the axioms.
So I like the Nile Empire from an Axiom perspective because it's a great cosm to start. If you're just starting out in Torg Eternity, it's a great place to start. The You're about middle of the road in most stuff. Everybody's familiar with the 30s and 40s of our world, and that's really, if you've ever been to one of those themed parties where it's like the Flapper 19 Roaring 20s or something like that, and you've done one of those themed company parties or a holiday party or something like that that's done like that, then you've got this idea already. And so it's not hard to translate from I've never played a game before to let's put you into the Nile Empire and off you go, because revolvers are a thing, prop driven aircraft are a thing, and they're not super high tech, right? But they can look super cool and high tech when weird science starts getting involved, but they still look like a hybrid of a prop driven something you might see at Area 51 and call a UFO. So from a tech aspect, if you just think of World War II as a new guy or new gal playing this, dropped into Nile Empire, World War II tech, you're pretty much golden. It's hard to screw that up. Social axiom, it's just, go into some of the older traditions and work out of that. From a magic I like to think of, rather than calling it magic, I like to call it more sorcery when you start talking about the Nile Empire, because when you start building pulp heroes, one of the aspects you can pull out of is, I was this ancient thing got found and willed to me from my great great grandfather, and it was found in a trunk in the attic. And we're cleaning out grandma's stuff and found this from great granddad that nobody knew what it was. But when I drew this sword, all of a sudden the smoke filled the room, and now I know how to do samurai stuff. And you're like, oh, okay. And so you can take on, the smoky samurai or something as your thing. But that's more, to me, calling it magic sounds more like Isle. Whereas if you put this sorcery, and there's even a pulp sorcerer archetype, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
some perks that are pulp sorcery. And so that keeps in the theme of magic for the Nile Empire, because it is very different. Um, Especially when you get the Egyptian style and you're starting to work engineering in there, and mathematicians, that the Egyptian magic works on numbers, right? So I like to call them math magicians, just because that's their theme. That's how they make their thing happen, is they do numbers, and they make the numbers do wacky stuff, and then all of a sudden, poof, there's your effect, whatever it is. So that's more sorcery to me, carries that through. And then finally you got that spirit axiom, and really, the spirit axiom for me is the thing I struggle with maybe the most in Torg, because it's tech. It's something you can touch. You can pick up tech and you can look at it and throw cards on the floor. Um, and tech, in Magic, we've all played the world's most popular D&D game, probably, and fantasy game, and got an idea what that is. And so, social, that's role playing, but that spirit axiom just kind of, okay. We start talking about Torg Eternity Miracles, but that's why I struggle with spirit. But anyway, that's how I look at it. It's a great place to start.
JM.
So, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to key off on what Mark said, aside from the fact that really, like, the thing about spirit is, the higher spirit rises, you kind of have this bell curve where there's nothing, and then you kind of get to the top of the curve, which is below where Nile Empire is at, and it's like, ooh, now there's a bunch of gods, and there's these we've now hit this point where there's enough spiritual energy that there's a lot of different religions that can work miracles. And all of the gods, there's sort of this polytheism, if you will, to quote my 18th century German theologian friends. And then by about 18 or 19, one of them emerges as dominant and becomes the dominant theme of all miracles. There can still be other deities and stuff on the fringe, but one of them has basically, when spirit gets high enough, one of them establishes itself as the primary one. And then when you go even higher than that, all other ones become contradictions, I believe. Like miracles from other faiths are contradictory to reality. So what we have here is, like, we're right on the cusp of this I want to call it this Terran, right? That's where they're from. They're actually from Terra. This Terran religion of, or this Terran faith in Dr. Mobius, and the sort of not quite Egyptian, but very Egyptian-esque religion is the dominant faith throughout all of the Nile Empire. The Nile Empire spans a massive chunk of North Africa down through Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, and then as far east as like Saudi Arabia and Jordan, Saudi Arabia. So think about where that's at in terms to like core Earth religions, and now those are all under the auspice of the religion of Terra. And so there's a lot. I mean, it's ripe for Storm Knights who are religious characters who want to go in there and deal with this, but also, right, the people who are the Ords who are changing, they don't care, right? It's the faith of Terra, it's the faith of Mobius. That's I don't even want to hear about anything else. I don't want to hear about the light and the dark, or the cyber pope, or even the core Earth religions that they may have belonged to before. It's no, we follow the faith of not animism, amatism.
Amatism.
Yeah,
And they actually, Pharaoh Mobius outlawed all other religions. So even
yeah.
if they can work and are not contradictory,
I don't think it's I think it's 22 or 23 where that, but it's
or if you have
direction.
a world law to make it.
Or you have a world law, yeah.
A hint for future viewers and listeners. So yes, one of the things I wanted to add to what Mark said, one of the cool aspects of Nile Empire that I always enjoyed both playing and game mastering over players who did both magicians or sorcerers, pulp sorcerers, and miracle workers, is you can choose to go the normal path of magic and miracles, of casting it just like everybody else does, and there is a spell list for Nile Empire, but you can also pick pulp powers and say that they are powered by either your faith and you're casting them or invoking them. You know, you're casting spells, and you just say it's the same thing, it's just different mechanics that I roll to do the things. I have a matist that has some miracles as well as pulp powers that he says are miracles.
Yeah.
And then I have a character, or as a game master, I have a player with characters who have had pulp powers and just magic spells also, and said it's all pulp sorcery.
Yeah.
So that's cool. If you can't find that thing that you want, don't just look at the pulp powers as this is a weird science gadget or it's an innate ability. You can use it mystically and gain that, and just have the window dressing, as you will, over it as this came from my faith or my study of magic. So it's a way to do that. So let's go ahead and get into the major world laws, which are some of the most player-friendly world laws out of
100%.
all of them.
Short of Core Earth, I think, maybe.
Yeah, comparable. We'll say very comparable to Core Earth. So the first one is the Law of Action. JM, let's get into the Law of Action.
So the Law of Action is the idea that, at any point, someone's going to kick in the door. I think I talked a little bit about this when we were on Core Earth, and this holds even more true in the Nile Empire. If at any point the game is stalling, goons kick in the door and action happens, right? This is an action-driven cosm. Things happen because you are punching or shooting people to move the plot forward, or you are being punched or shot at, and it's moving the plot forward. So normally in the mechanical effect of that is that a character. So I've always ruled this because it doesn't say a Storm Knight, it says a character. So I've allowed reality rated Nile Empire characters to use the Law of Action as well. So normally in Torg, when you spend a possibility, you re-roll your dice. It's a great effect. It's very potent, very powerful. However, in the Nile Empire, you may immediately spend another possibility and pick the better of the two results. So basically, you can spend up to 2 possibility on a roll. And I think the Nile Empire possibility, you don't have to pick between the two. They actually add together. It's basically a possibility with an up if you have a Nile Empire possibility. So if you think about it, it allows players to do, drawing from my own game and restart for listening. It allows, when trying to flee a Dr. Mobius military base in a stolen Zeppelin, to choose instead to pop a U-turn and fly the Zeppelin back into the base and blow it up with an amazing roll because you can get 3 rolls and pick the best of them. I do not. I love I love it because it allows players to do crazy things. Like players do crazy things when they have ups. It's just the nature of Torg. The law of action means sometimes it's not quite as good as an up, but it still lets you get kind of your best possible chance when using it.
Mark.
So law of action is pretty much, I mean, it's it's it really is what it says, law of action. You're standing there and you're like, I don't know what to do. Do something.
Mm-hmm.
Action kicks off a reaction, and more often than not, if it's just the base reaction, like this guy is not giving me what I want. Okay, grab him by the shirt and pop him in the nose, and now you started a bar brawl. Okay, and in the process of the bar brawl, you bash somebody into the wall, and oh, lo and behold, the secret door that reveals the speakeasy you didn't know was there because you didn't make your find check. Now you know where it is because law of action.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that kind of thing can happen. Um, as JM said, the possibilities you begin to possibilities become possible. Anything becomes possible, and
Mm-hmm.
as a game master running in the Nile Empire, you have to be ready for things to escalate in directions that you didn't expect rapidly,
Mm-hmm.
dramatically, and out of control. And that's fine. It's okay to do that. You just have to be ready enough to ad lib where it's going. Let your players. It's a sandbox thing. Just let them go where they're going, and you start having to figure out, oh crap, they're supposed to be over here, but now they're going over there. How do I get them back around the block here? Okay, well, there's a lot of ways to do that. Just that start kicking in the creative juices, you
Mm-hmm.
know, contact cards, whatever. But there are actually 2 Cosm cards specific to this law that I like suddenly, and then the law of action. And I don't know if we're doing Cosm cards yet or not. I
We
won't.
can sprinkle Cosm cards throughout
Okay,
part
so
one
law
and
of
two.
action, all Storm Knights may immediately play 2 Destiny cards into their action pool. So we don't talk about the mechanics a lot, but this game has cards. You know, you have cards in your hand, and you have those are Destiny cards, and then these are Cosm cards. You get one of the Cosm cards, you can play whenever you want. But in the middle of a combat is when that law of action would come in, that card. And that's a great, we got ambushed, or somebody the mob goons rolled up on us and they're opening fire. Okay, we're going to turn over a card and start combat. Hey, you know what? Law of action. We now have 2 cards in our pool, and we can draw on those, and off you go. And that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're really stuck, then suddenly, and I mean that's kind of self-explanatory too. You just what happens? So if you're going to play in the Nile Empire, you got to go through these Cosm cards, and Rod calls them his stacks because he goes through them, he looks at it and says, well, if they get this one, what am I going to do? And come up with 3 ideas, and just kind of bullet point them, set them aside, because if somebody plays that, you just go grab that idea, and you're already ready, and you look cool because you're ready. And if you like the artistic aspect of GMing and you want to try being challenged, don't prep them and just see what the situation suggests and run with it off the cuff, which is also some of the best role playing and the best gaming I've ever seen out of players, is when you're winging it, and they
Mm-hmm.
have no idea what's behind the screen. They don't know what's on the mission that you've got before you. If you throw it in there, to me, that's the art of GMing, is my players never know what's prepped and what isn't when they're on page or off page. And if I do my job right, they get to the end of the mission and they never know where they threw me a curveball, right?
Yeah. So yeah, the law of action is I love the spending and choosing the best out of the 2 possibilities, and then with that Nile possibility, the specific Nile possibility, you get to add it. And you get those great crazy rolls. You add a hero, you add a drama, and then yes, you get those. Oh, the players went back to the base and blew it up, or in my case, they were surrounded by 40 shock troopers, it was supposed to be a surrender, and they went gung ho, and it was like, no, we will not. We got these cards and these possibilities. Okay. And and then you just go along with it. Mm-hmm. And even we say this all the time, and again, make your Cosmverse your own. Make the game your own. If you are going through an officially published, the one for the Nile Empire is Fires of Ra. It's a great adventure. I'm GMing it now. Mark was the one who ran it when I was as a player. When I was the player, and if they do stuff that's not in it, when we write it, we can't think of every single outcome.
Yeah,
it's fine. It doesn't have to go how that thing is planned. There's something in there, and I won't do spoilers, but there is something in there, and it's supposed to go this certain way. My group made it go a completely other way, and you just go with it. A couple of times they took out an enemy that was supposed to reoccur. So what happens? Like JM said, soap opera time. It was his daughter who took up the mantle of what her dad was, and now she has a vengeance driven against the Storm Knights who took out her dad. It's just wonderful.
So if I may share, the craziest thing that happened in any Torg game happened in the Nile Empire, and my group, they infiltrated the 1001 Inventions of Dr. Mobius, a movie, a propaganda film that was being filmed, and they reworked it as an anti-propaganda film. Like, one of the player characters was a movie star and was constantly making Dr. Mobius look cooler than he was in real life. And they had glory. So the plan was like, they were to distribute this film and people would be like, well, he's not as great as this actor was playing him. And at the end, Dr. Mobius shows up, and I think this is going to be a big fight. And my actor friend, or the guy playing the actor, played star-crossed romance. Spent the whole fight, everyone was like, what is he doing? He's not engaging with any of the bad guys. He's showing the pieces of Dr. Mobius as he was portrayed on film, as opposed to fighting, Dr. Mobius. And then he played star-crossed romance, or star-crossed lovers, which is a Cosm-specific. It's like the romance card on steroids in the Nile Empire. He played it on the darkness device and was like, don't you want to be with me as opposed to Dr. Mobius?
Oh gosh.
And it was the craziest thing. It's the most that my Cosmverse has departed from canon.
Official.
And it was, it only could have happened because of the cards that were in play and the crazy by the seat of your pants nature of the Nile Empire.
Yeah, it's great just to watch players build up on something, and you don't have any clue. Other players might not either, and then boom, and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, the law of action, it keeps things going. I always like it's not just we're having a fight in an open market. We're having a fight in the open market, and then a tank comes pulling through, and then the people in their carts are trying to dodge out of the way. People are falling over fruit carts. The tent falls down, and it's just things, just actions and actions, which kind of leads into the next world law of drama, which is those obstacles. Adding in, you have the actions that keep the pace fast, and drama adds all of those extra crazy stuff. In the book, there is a chart for obstacles. Some are physical and some are metaphysical. Because my last group, I want to say it was 2 sessions ago, they had that appear, and the obstacle was just all heroes disconnect. Boom! You're all disconnected.
That happened
in the middle of. Go ahead.
That happened so if you get really into Torg, I highly recommend picking up the Cosm-specific drama decks.
Oh yeah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
They will
for
have
no other reason than this Cosm.
Yeah, because like one of them is an obstacle shows up, roll twice on the obstacle table, and in the middle of the fight, everyone disconnected. And what do? Well, you pray.
It changes
Right,
the
'cause you,
aspect of everything.
You go from, oh, these are a bunch of goons we can take out with no problem, to the, oh no, we can't soak
yeah.
until we
Well,
reconnect. It
we can't
adds,
use cards, we can't soak, we can't create contradictions. Like
yeah, it's very,
it was
very
wonderful.
fun because in Nile, it's usually Nile is the, in my opinion, the biggest stack towards the players.
Mm.
So when there's anything that flips it on its head, like that obstacle, then all of a sudden, for a round or two until it takes the people to reconnect, it starts getting nail biting. It adds to that cliffhanger feel of the pulp serials
Yeah, but
back in the
see,
day.
the law of drama works for the villains too, because it's all of that. It's that if you don't have a body, you don't have a dead guy, right?
Yep.
Any excuse. Soap operas coming back in, falls off the bridge in the mist and the river below that. Yeah, there are a bunch of rocks and it's 1,000 foot fall, but do you have a body? No, you don't. So guess what? He's coming back.
Well, and if you play it right, the players should love the law of drama, even when it works against them. I had one player catch up with his nemesis that has been dogging him for the entire first act, and he killed him. And it was this big triumphant moment. And Christopher looks at me and he's like, "Can I play Inevitable Return on him?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, you can definitely do that." So even when
Yes,
he had the
please.
victory, he wanted this guy to come back
Sure.
because he loved it so much. I'm like, yeah, here's a Nile Empire possibility. That's the most Nile Empire thing that could have happened right now. Like, that's awesome.
I
It works so well. And this is again the law of drama. Lean into the tropes. It's not cheesy to have him, you think you're having a one-on-one with this guy, and then from behind the curtains drop and there's 40 shock troopers there with Schmeisers pointed at you. That's the law of drama. And you're like, well, that was unexpected.
Yeah.
I had the same kind of thing with my very first group that I ever played, Torg Eternity. We actually started an original Torg and then switched after maybe like five small adventures, switched to Torg Eternity. And one of the characters was a professor that was into weird science. And his nemesis became one of his students that he failed him in his doctorate. When he went to
That's
do his dissertation, and he came back as a, you failed me, now I'm going to beat you in weird science. And they kept doing that interaction back and forth, and with the inevitable return, yes. And sometimes it's the law of drama is the one that doesn't necessarily have mechanics, but it has the cosm cards and
yeah.
the booster deck cards that give those obstacles out. And the law or inevitable return, that gives you possibilities for bringing that person back if
Yeah.
they're a villain. So they really needed possibilities at the time. So they were, we don't really want the person to come back, but they're going to come back anyway. So might as well get some possibilities for it. So those are really fun. And then hand in hand, action drama, and there is the law of heroism. So we'll go over to Mark about the law of heroism.
So this is really one that makes the Nile Empire. It sneaks up on you because people don't expect it to be that good until you get used to the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does, everywhere else, your card, the cards you can have four cards, unless you are under glory for that act, in which case you can have five. Well, the law of heroism allows you to have five cards in the Nile Empire, and if you're under glory, you get six. And players quickly realize that you can save a lot of bacon having the right cards, not just in your hand. Don't think about your cards. Think about our cards, right? We've said this before in the beginning of this series. The more you can think of as a team about cards, the better off you are. And we play like the Wednesday night stream. a lot of times when we start the act and we, okay, everybody drop your cards down. We're going to do the card thing. And we draw a new hand. Everybody starts going, well, who's got this and who's got that? And do we have drama? And who's got glory? I've got leadership. So if we need to, what do we need to get out? And so we start shuffling cards around, and who's got situational awareness, so they can, the beginning of a combat, they can drop a card in their pool, and so you give them the leadership, so that then you stack their hand with the glory and the hero and the drama. Because if it happens on that, so often it happens on that first roll when nobody has any cards to use, and that guy with situational awareness, leadership, boom, I'm going to give you this and I'm going to give you this, and now we can do everything, and let's go right in your pool, and look at that, we got glory on the first round of combat. Okay, so here's your possibility. Everybody draw another card. That's the law of heroism, and it really plays into it. And until it sneaks up on you because everybody forgets about it until you start moving cards around, or you don't have as many cards.
JM.
No, I mean it seems like a simple world law, but it is one that has a massive mechanical shift on the group. And it feeds into this, you guys are the heroes. Like Kowalski, our techno demon aspirant, loved being on the Nile Empire side of Istanbul because he got to feel like a normal character. So he got 4 cards when the law of heroes was
yeah, I was thinking about him as I was talking about that.
Yeah, and as we said with our Tharcold episode, is people don't realize how a card can change things. Mm-hmm. And when everybody in the group is getting an extra card, if you're playing four players, that's 4 cards.
And if you
like
get
my group, and my group of 7 players, that's 7 extra cards that the entire group gets. Boom.
I got to step away for just a second, Lehman. I'm sorry.
Sure. No
I'll
problem.
be right back.
So yeah, it's just a really cool thing. That card mechanic and getting those extra cards seems minor, but it's not. It can lead. That's X many less cards in the deck in your hand and ready to go into a pool. And if you have ways to get them into your pool, it works very well.
Yeah.
So let's move to the minor world laws.
I got those pulled up.
Oh, great! So we have the law of morality that we can get into. So JM, you said you had those pulled up.
Oh yeah. So, and I don't know if we want to get into Dr. Mobius and his personal flaw, which is, I think, sort of hard-coded into the Nile Empire, which is why the world laws are so stacked in favor of the heroes, I think. But this law of morality says that there is good, there is evil. And it kind of plays out in a couple of ways. First, villains tend to be far more powerful than heroes individually. It explains why the group, the Society for Law of Cairo, for example, has to come together to defeat one villain. Villains tend to be more powerful, but they're also more selfish. They keep their power to themselves, and they don't rely on others. So that's why you have this one villain versus a group of heroes. They always tend to have a fatal flaw that the heroes can exploit at some key moment. So the more modern example of this that I think is very meta and aware, that I think why I love it, is Syndrome from the original Incredibles movie. You got me monologuing. Like that's Empire villain, except they're not so well aware of them, self-aware to realize they're doing it. And third, here's the thing: don't be afraid of it. And in fact, I have often offered possibilities to players in this situation. Heroes and villains will surrender if the odds are against them in the middle of a fight, because they know dramatically there will always be an opportunity to escape and turn the tables. And so as a GM, I know there's, it's a great trope. We use it all the time in stories and in movies and in TV shows. But to the players, they're never going to want to surrender, which is why sometimes I offer a possibility or a destiny card where I'm like, guys, things are going against you. They're trying to capture you at this point. If you give in, I promise you, the world laws say you will have a chance to turn this around. which I think most players are receptive to at that point. Because the first couple of times it happens, in like other games, I think the way as a GM that I like to introduce this, because it's so foreign to our idea of playing the hero, I have the villains surrender or far more often than they normally would, just because I want the players to get into the mindset of, okay, this is something that happens in this cosm, and they expect to be treated with respect. And we're not going to just gun you down now. No, we're going to take you back to the lair and put you in some sort of easily escapable death trap. That's the trope we're looking for. So that's the law of morality. Like there's black and white morality in the Nile Empire, but it's it also shifts the way power is looked at. Right, on the good side, it's much more of a communal or group teamwork kind of thing. Where on the evil side, it's gathered by several very powerful individuals who may have goons and such, obviously, but
nobody even close to them and equal.
no, because they don't want to be. They're not going to have anybody in their power structure that they can't pick out.
Watch the bungling lieutenant.
Yeah,
Batman from the 1960s.
Yes,
you will get the goons. You will get the one villain. Even on the villain team ups, they're not happy to be teaming up necessarily, and you will get the capturing and putting in some ridiculous death trap that they escape from.
Mm-hmm.
and that is pretty much a trope to lean into. Mark, thoughts on the law of morality?
I'm with JM on the capturing part. It's not just because the players don't really, as role players, we're not used to this idea that the bad guy is going to capture us, because from most other games, if the bad guy is in a position to capture you, he's going to kill you. Nile Empires, that's not how the Nile works. And what usually helps from the standpoint of getting that capture trope rolling is if there's a Nile hero in the Storm Knights crew, you can always see them like, well, yeah, you're a hero. You're supposed to take them in and take them to the authorities. When the Tharkold guy is like, well, no, I put one in behind his ear because that's how you do this. You leave him in a shallow grave if you're really feeling nice. Otherwise, you just roll him out of the back of a truck as you're driving 55. That's not how the Nile does things, but that might be what the players are expecting because they're bad guys. Well, a lot of times though, and I'm not going to say what missions they are, but there are several missions that write that into the plot line of the mission, and you don't get key pieces of information if you don't get captured, because when they capture you, where do they take you?
to their base.
Into their base.
Yeah.
And then you're sitting right next to his workbench where his journal happens to be laying open to the last thing he wrote down, which happens to do with how to turn off the world-ending gizmo that he just created, and he's getting ready to put at the top of Mount Everest in his Zeppelin or wherever he's going to hide it. But the point is, you wouldn't get to see that stuff if you don't get captured, and he puts you in his easily escaped death trap that you now have this fantastic DSR to get out of before it shocks you to death, right? So the law of morality, the title of it kind of hints at the idea that there's good and evil, but it's more than that. There is good and evil, but you're the hero, and so you have to. In Nile Empire, heroes are expected to act a certain way, and in the Nile Empire, villains are expected to act a certain way. And it's not just because they're villains that they do, it's the cosm they live in. It's like breathing. We breathe in, we breathe out. The law of morality is a thing. You're a bad guy, you do bad guy things. You're a good guy, you do good guy things. And everybody's like, that's not a good guy. And you would never do it. You would never do that.
And the thing to remember is there are always plucky reporters and photographers just around the corner in the Nile Empire. There's actually several drama cards that play off of that. So if you're like, and the book under the law of inevitable return gives you some advice as the GM. Like, if players go to do this, remind them how wrong it feels here in this cosm and what's going on. And then if they go ahead and do it, have that flashbulb go off. And, front page Cairo News the next day.
Well, there's even
You're a villain.
Yeah.
Now you're being mistaken for one, right? There's one of the Cosm cards. I don't have the bonus stuff. I've just got the first 10 because I wasn't able to back everything. But captured, play when any Storm Knight's slain, he is instead KO'd, captured, and immediately taken from the area by his foes. All allies who perish in this scene share a similar fate. And if things are going south, there you go.
Yeah, if you're close to a TPK, you got a way out.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
fits the story. And to even go along with the not only surrendering, and why we talk about what happens in our own group is to give you ideas. It's not necessarily we do like talking about what happens in our own group, but it's also to give you, the viewers and listeners, ideas of what you can do. My group was in a really tough fight, and they were down resources, down cards, very, very little possibilities. And then they triggered a Death Trap DSR on top of that while fighting the villains. But the villains weren't the ones who set up the Death Trap, so they had to escape as well. And there was that moment in the Nile Empire, the villains, the heroes, look at each other and are like, truce, and they helped each other escape. And then once they helped each other escape, then they just went on, they went on their paths as
pretty walked backward.
Type thing, and it wasn't a let's start fighting again, because that's such a Nile thing. And if they come back, there's at least that, where the villains and the heroes have that respect or that acknowledgement of each other, and you can add into that at the Nile Empire a lot more than you can with the other realities. So that is real cool.
And villains with a code of honor, right? Like a code that they follow, which can also be their flaw. But I mean, that's another great trope. That this villain won't do X. And as soon as the players get that through their head, put them in a situation where, like you were saying, with the Death Trap, put them in a situation where they're like, well, this other guy is doing something, and I know you would never do that. So help us stop this other guy from, crossing this line that you would never cross. And you can get these dramatic twists where the heroes and the villains are fighting on the same side for a brief amount of time.
So then we'll go right into the law of inevitable return, which we've talked. There's a Cosm card about it, and it's, as Mark said many times, if there is not a body, they're not dead. And even if there is a body, that doesn't guarantee that that's their body.
They might have a twin or a blood relative who picks up the mantle or whatever.
Or a clone, a plastic surgery to make somebody look like them, body doubles, just tons of stuff. And the law of masks, which is a
fantastic law.
We'll start with Mark on this one first.
Okay, so I love the law of masks from a player's perspective, because I played a character. He was a living land. He was a Marine who got trapped in a living land, and he transformed, and he got found by Lenala, who loved his desire to survive, and so he became chosen of Lenala, and she blessed him to be an Adinos, right? And so he's a human being transformed into the living land, played as essentially a primitive human, but he claimed he was an Adinos, and he took all the Adinos perks, and Grunt goes that he didn't remember much. He didn't remember his name. He was Grunt because he was a grunt in the Marine Corps. He said, I'm Grunt. And so he goes to Nile Empire, and they tell him about the law of masks. And so he's looking around, and he finds this towel. They put him up in the Hilton Hotel. He gets a towel from the Hilton Hotel, and it's got the Hilton logo on it, superimposed, and says Hilton on the bottom. So he tears a piece of it off, puts it around his face with holes cut out of it, and ties it around his back as a cape. And they all look at him, and they say, "Who are you?" He says, "I am Hilton Smasher," because he punched things out. He had death claws. That's what he said. So he ended up fighting and making the insidious Wuhan his nemesis, and the Hilton Smasher. Well, Wuhan was looking for the Hilton Smasher specifically because this guy just made his own mask, put it on, and who are you? I'm the Hilton Smasher. Okay, and he started smashing stuff, and I mean that's the kind of stuff you can do with the law of masks. It's just it's it's Clark Kent and Superman. Just that's a mask in the Nile Empire. If you think it's a mask, it's a mask. It's
It'll
fantastic.
keep your secret identity from your hero identity. And it could be glasses, it could be the little domino mask. It doesn't matter, which is fun. And we'll switch over to JM. And it provides armor. Yep.
Yes.
2 points.
Yes.
Like it's not an insignificant
to anybody.
Full body armor also, so it doesn't matter where it is.
Cyber papacy, you're a drone jockey, don't have any armor or whatever you are, put a mask on.
It does only work. It works in the Nile Empire, not in other places, but
Correct.
It's just really good. And you have those cards that appear, like JM said, on the booster deck that have the middle text in there that has neat little things. And one of them is like, if you, I don't remember the exact wording in it, but it's something like if you fail or something. Maybe it's if you get a successful attack against you, then your mask falls off.
So if they get an outstanding success against you, they knock your mask off, and a reporter is there to record it.
Right. So it's like compounds. There you got the drama and all these world laws tied together is just really, really cool. And the law of masks is the unmasking the villain, unmasking the hero. There's cards that help with those, and the masks themselves provide a mechanical benefit. So it's just really, really cool. Next time we'll get into more things. But anything else before we wrap up part 1?
Not really. I feel like we covered a lot.
We went quick.
And we're getting a little more organized after doing so many of these. It's like, okay, we do axioms and then we do world laws. But next time we'll talk about players, both players and game master side, how you can lean into the Nile Empire, things to think about. We'll get into the actual pulp powers and talk about how they work and other things like that. So we do thank you very much for watching and or listening to these episodes of the Delphi Council Debriefings. And please send us emails at torgdcd@gmail.com. And I guess that is all we have. So once again, we thank you for listening to us. And until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse.